Good evening and welcome to Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse. In recent months, the Capital Region has been shaken by disturbing cases of animal neglect and abuse. In Albany, a man admitted to starving his pit bull to death last February. Police say Christopher Maxwell left his dog in a crate for several days before setting the crate and the dog on fire in a parking lot. In Schenectady, a dog was found abandoned and injured with its ear cut off and fractured teeth. One man was arrested for allegedly abandoning her, but no one has been held accountable for the abuse. Meanwhile, a number of pet boarding facilities have been reporting dog deaths in recent months. The most recent, a dog who died in Meadowdale Acres in Guilderland, who died of severe neglect. In July, a French bulldog named Gus died in Half Moon. The owner of A Time for Paws is accused of intentionally killing Gus after leaving him in high temperatures. Fast forward to August in Argyle, where 21 dogs died at one facility from a lack of ventilation and water. The couple in that case charged and pleaded not guilty with multiple misdemeanor charges. Now, these are just a few of many cases sparking outrage, begging the question, are New York's animal cruelty laws strong enough to protect animals, or are abusers slipping through the cracks? Tonight, every person sitting with me at this table has been directly involved in some of the region's high-profile animal cruelty cases through investigation, prosecution, or the push for reform. On the panel with me, we have Saratoga County Sheriff Deputies Leah Howe and Nikki Vogel. We also have Andrew Fiumano, who is the Humane Law Enforcement Director at Mohawk Hudson Humane Society. We have the Washington County District Attorney, Tony Jordan, with us as well. We have State Senator Jim Tedisco and the Chief of the Schenectady County SPCA, Greg Rinke, all together with us tonight. They will share the challenges, the gaps, and the possible solutions to stopping animal abuse and holding those responsible accountable. Let's begin our discussion with those who work the front lines responding to these cases. Now, we have the sheriff deputies here. Tell me about some of the recent cases you guys have investigated. I know we had some hoarding cases over the summer, as well as the Half Moon case in the that boarding facility. Tell me what you guys go through these investigations.
So to start, usually we'll get some sort of tip, or our town ACOs may have some sort of tip that they provide to us about an ongoing issue, and then we will look into those tips and try and interview and investigate as much as possible, and then we go from there.
Mr. Fiumano, you also investigate some of these cases. You respond to a lot of these high-profile cases. Do you run into any challenges when you respond to these scenes?
Really awareness of the public. Quite often we'll get calls about things that, somebody knows something isn't right, but they're not sure, what's going on with the animals or if the law is actually being violated. So we really try to educate the public on what the laws are, so that way we can get accurate reports. Because the more accurate of a report we get, the more quickly and appropriately we can put the right resources into play.
Do you guys feel like you guys are given enough tools to respond to these scenes?
There's really never enough resources. It's kind of going to be true across criminal justice that, we always are going to need more investigators. We're going to need more vets with forensic capabilities, more places to store and hold animals that are safe and can give them the continuing care that they need to recover from these cruelty cases. I think is a huge thing.
I think that's one of our biggest hurdles, is finding places for these animals to be housed and well cared for during the duration of the case.
I know there was a case in Westerlo where a number of horses were rescued. It cost roughly $50,000 a month for the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society to care for these horses. So it's not only a financial strain, but also a capacity issue. Is that correct?
Yes, especially when you come into large animal cases. We were very fortunate that there was a very generous person that had a facility that had, barns and stables and plenty of pasture for those horses to go to. But if it wasn't for that, that would have been a very difficult situation for us. And we're still going to handle the case. We're still going to remove those animals. But it's much easier when you can keep most of them in one location as opposed to putting them all out to multiple fosters or other farms.
And Greg Rinke, I know you are the chief of the Schenectady County SPCA. Tell me some of the cases that you have worked on and some of the challenges you've seen. You're also an attorney, so provide that aspect for us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest cases that we see oftentimes is hoarding cases where people start off with good intentions of, hey, I want to bring in a cat, and then all of a sudden it comes to they now have 30 cats, right? So they're trying to do something really good for an animal, but in the end they're hoarding so many animals that they can't provide, you know, good shelter for them and a good living environment for them. And one of the challenges we have is, and I echo what Andrew said, is that when we take those animals in, it's hard to find resources to place 30 to 50 cats at one time. You know, not too long ago, we actually had a case where we had a giraffe, and it's very hard to find a place that's going to accept a giraffe, you know, as a resource. So it's really challenging for us in finding the resources and the ability to foster out and have places where these animals can be sheltered.
What about preventing repeat offenders? Because I know some of these hoarders, you know, within 5 years after they're arrested, we end up finding that they have pets again. So how do we stop repeat offenders?
I think the biggest way is to have a resource of a reporting and a requirement to mandated reporting, where if you've been convicted of animal abuse, there's a registry, and I think that registry really needs to be statewide. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing now on the animal abuse side is it's not statewide, it's patchwork. So one county might not be talking to another county, and I think that's the best way to stop this.
We have a bill pending now. I'm the sponsor in the Senate. I authored the bill, statewide directory. And this is a complex issue. You have some individuals who are just bad people. And they have to understand, we have to educate the public. A long time ago, I passed Buster's Law over 20 years ago, one of the first animal cruelty felony bills. District attorneys know the issues now. The judges know the issues now. Law enforcement know the issues now. And the public is reporting the issues more. That's why we may be seeing an uptick. But the point is well taken here. You have some people, like the woman in Half Moon with her family, who had 36 dogs and cats, had a pig in the house, had a chicken in the house, full of feces. The kids were covered with it. You could put that woman in jail for 30 years. If she's left there and just walks out the door, in 2 weeks she'd have 36 dogs and cats and pigs and chickens. Psychological evaluation and treatment is necessary. We have to allow the judges. I have a bill for that. I have a bill to make sure the judges say, you were convicted of a serious type of brutality and cruelty towards a companion pet. It's a felony. You will never own a companion pet again. It's not a right. It's a privilege. And I think law enforcement knows this better than I do. The FBI puts this up on an A level. People who hurt animals, and this is what we have to tell the public, report it if you see it. Because if you don't care about animals, though, care about your brother, care about your sister, your mother, they go on to hurt individuals. Son of Sam, Ted Bundy, Dahmer, the Columbine kids all had a history of abusing animals before they went on to become serial murderers. It's a bridge crime. It's an indicator. We want to get that statewide bill passed for a directory. We want to increase the penalties now, because with the criminal justice reform, so-called reform, I really think it's deformed. Everything's being dumbed down. So Buster's Law bill is 2 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. I want to make it 4 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, because when you plead that down, maybe we can get them off the streets. But right now, they're walking out the door with a pass with maybe a slap on the wrist, and they're committing these crimes over and over again. And when you talk about, we didn't turn the air conditioning on for the border, you know, we had a press conference today on Bill, Safe Companion Pet Bordering Act. You can't tell 21 families and 21 dogs died that you didn't remember to turn the air conditioning on. Now, what could it possibly be? If you don't have a uniform approach statewide, and that's the bill we put forward today, take it out of the hands of local municipalities, because most people don't know. There are no real statewide laws for bordering in the state of New York. My bill would make sure they have the water, they have the nutrition, they have the space, they would be monitored. It would be in the Ag and Markets Committee, and the commissioner would oversee that now. It's an important piece of legislation, but we really do need a holistic approach to deal with this right now, because as Sheriff Zerlo said in Saratoga today, it's epidemic over the last 6 months.
Yeah. And going back to the registry, the animal abuse registry, I know you're pushing for a statewide registry. In Albany County, you guys have a registry. How is that going? Do you think that it's working? Or are there any shortfalls with it?
I think it's a great resource because it allows members of the public to look up and see, hey, this person who wants to, maybe somebody's got an animal that they're trying to rehome themselves, or their dog had puppies, their cat had kittens. They can look and see, oh, this person, I can't legally give this person an animal, or this person shouldn't have an animal. It's also a great tool for law enforcement, but like you said, there are some shortcomings with it that besides the people who are actually convicted, one of the things that's happening in Albany County is we're doing interim no animal orders. So when somebody's charged with cruelty, they're brought to court, they get arraigned by the judge, there's an order issued that says they're not allowed to own, possess, reside with, or harbor animals for the duration of that case. We really need those types of no animal orders to be searchable by law enforcement and by animal control, so that way if maybe I'm dealing with somebody, but then Deputy Vogler crosses paths with them up in Saratoga County, that when she runs that person and checks to see if they are wanted, if they have any criminal history, that no animal order pops up, so that way they can be enforced statewide and not tied to a single county.
Do you feel a statewide registry will accomplish that?
I think that would be a huge step forward, yes.
The problem right now is 31 or 32 counties have a registry. Now, the other counties, an individual could come, have a lot of abuse in those counties, go into those other 30 and adopt a dog there. Or from the county he's on a register, go to one of the 28 or 29 that don't have his information, adopt one from there, as has been said, and bring it back to that county. So it needs to be statewide, it needs to be uniform, just like bordering needs to be statewide and uniform to weed out the bad apples. We don't want to eliminate business, take away jobs, but most of the borders I talk to who are valid and doing the right things say, we like this bill because we'll get rid of the bad people because we're doing most of these things. But you have to have a certain level of uniformity when you're boarding. You hate to see your constituents, an individual or family, take a vacation and come back. We see what just happened out in Altamont. A dog died, and they buried the dog before the family got home and didn't even know the dog was dead and buried. They dug it up, and there's 1 through 5 to see the how healthy the dog was. It was at a 1. It was ribs was showing through. It wasn't being fed at all. So they may be cutting back on food to save money. They may be cutting back on energy. With a uniform approach to bordering, they can be assured they're going to be treated at least close to the same way they're treated for safety at home. Exercise, spacing, ventilation, temperature control, things of that nature. We've got to have that in several other bills in New York State.
The other thing that I think is important, too, is that a state registry has to be web searchable. And right now, there's about 31 counties that have registries, but not all of them are web searchable. This morning, I went online to do some searching, and a lot of the counties, you can't even click on their registry. So as law enforcement, it's very hard to know is someone even on the registry. And I think a statewide law would remedy that situation.
Anything more education to the public?
Absolutely.
Getting the word out that there is a registry, check it.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, we'll pause right here. When we return, we'll talk about the courtroom, why so many of these cases end with misdemeanor charges. Stay with us. Welcome back to Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse. We've talked about what investigators see on the front lines. Now what happens when these cases land in court? Some seeking justice for neglected animals feel there's a lack of accountability against offenders.
We called a few attorneys and all they said was that they consider animals. She said, unfortunately, they consider animals property damage. How is that possible? They have feelings. They have a heartbeat. They have love. They should be treated just like human beings.
All right, let's start that discussion with where animal cruelty laws are written in New York State. Instead of the penal code like violent offenses and assaults and other crimes, animal cruelty laws are written under the agriculture and markets law. Mr. Jordan, I know you've recently have been dealing with the case over in Argyle about with the boarding facility, 21 dogs dead. I know some of these families, they were upset that they were being charged with misdemeanors.
Right.
Tell me, with the animal cruelty laws being written in ag and markets, did that impact, or what kind of impact does that have on prosecuting cases or even investigating cases?
Less so an impact on prosecuting than it's how the laws are written. So we have a felony, one felony charge, and then one misdemeanor charge. And I understand where the public's concern would rise when they look at different types of conduct, all amount to the same charge. So under the misdemeanor law, conduct that is purposeful, intentional, where they're starving dogs, maltreating a dog, not providing them with proper medical care, that is the same misdemeanor charge as the hoarding example that Senator Disco was discussing, or cases that we've had where individuals have an elderly individual who has a younger child living with them, that child passes away, and the older person lacks the resources to care for the animals but doesn't have the wherewithal to get rid of them, or people that have mental health issues. All of that conduct is very different and ends up under the same type of charge. Under the misdemeanor statute, different than most of the penal law crimes that we deal with, there are instances where we don't have to prove intent. Law enforcement that's investigating them don't need to establish what the person, why they did it, or what the purpose for doing it was. They simply have to show that they had a duty to care and they didn't. So that's very different than the vast majority of penal law offenses that we see. Why it's not a felony is the felony statute, as written, really focuses on and actually requires very much a heinous act, where you would have to establish that the person's intent was to cause significant pain and suffering or death. But beyond that, they then have to show that it was done in an especially depraved manner. And that certainly is appropriate in instances like the one in Albany that you highlighted earlier. But I think when you look at the various, that wide gap in type of conduct that's covered in those two simple areas, I think that's why you see the public being really bothered, and understandably so. You know, we met with the 15 families that were so horribly impacted in Argyle, and it's very difficult in the emotion of it for them to understand, why is my family member, because for many people that is their dog is their pet, their family member, why is my dog or my cat treated differently than people, and that's essentially why is the way the law is written.
And do you feel that the law frames animals more so as property than living beings?
So yes, there is case law out there that has, and it mattered in a sense to help the victims in that particular case where that decision came down, but in terms of restitution, which again fails to adequately address the real emotional loss that the families suffer. But the law does essentially treat domesticated animals, our pets, as property when they look at issues of restitution. I think one of the advantages under ag and markets law is that we don't have to prove what we call a mens rea, that we don't have to establish some criminal culpability in essence. We just have to establish they had a duty to do something and they didn't. That's a positive on one side, but as you know, that caller indicated, it leaves families with a real hole and a proper feeling that the criminal justice system is letting them down.
And I know, one of the family members, they wanted to sue, but when they sought legal advice, they were told that you could only get really what you paid for the dog.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to recover damages because under the law, most animals are considered chattels or property. So you're most of the time going to be limited to the value of the animal. So it is difficult.
And to highlight why they talk about a statewide registry, I think one of the advantages, and it came up when we were discussing earlier, is with a statewide registry, the Division of Criminal Justice Services could actually add that on criminal histories, what we call file 15s, or the public would know as a rap sheet. So when somebody is stopped and there's just a regular run, dispatch would be able to say, not only is there an order of protection for a particular person, they could also say that person is not to have domesticated animals. And so if the officer sees a dog or a cat or any other pets, they would be able to do something about it in that instance. It becomes searchable. and far more usable than the patchwork system we have currently.
What is the maximum penalty someone can face for aggravated animal cruelty here in New York State?
Aggravated animal cruelty would be the felony. That is up to 2 years.
2 years.
Would be the maximum, correct.
2 years and a $5,000 fine.
And we're talking about some serious cases like the pit bull being set on fire.
Well, we had a case in Canada, Jahari, recently. Man gets in a car and purposely runs over a cat and kills it. To my way of thinking, that's a felony. That's a Buster law crime. And we have to understand that people own pets, cats, and dogs, but most people who own a pet understand they give them unconditional. They understand they're not their property. They care for them, and they understand the nexus between now. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing more people saying this is wrong to do to an animal, and they're reporting it. I think that's a part of the problem. The reason why we're seeing all these, they're coming to light now. We created animal advocacy over 25 days ago, put it in place. And we have hundreds of people who come to the Capitol to talk about legislation and to pass legislation. It's a bridge crime. And we have to tell people who don't seem to be concerned about us addressing this, well, look, if you don't care about animals, care about your sister, your brother, your daughter, or your mother, because these individuals who commit these crimes simply put in the research go on to hurt people. So the work that is being done to protect our companion pets and stop what's happening is in a process of protecting human beings as well as their pets.
There's also a huge connection between domestic violence and animal abuse. And oftentimes, domestic abusers, they'll abuse the animal of their partner to get at their partner. So oftentimes we see a direct connection between domestic violence and animal abuse.
For a while, under the new criminal justice so-called reforms, I don't know if they changed this, but we had a situation in Saratoga. A fella was mad at his wife. He was choking his wife. Went before the court. He said, my hands are tied. I got to give this fella a ticket to walk out the door. Usually they're mad when this happens, domestic violence. They want to hold him over for a couple of days to calm him down. I had to give him a ticket. 2 hours later, he was choking his wife in Saratoga County, and luckily they called and they saved her. But you can't be doing that with domestic violence situations because that's what happens when you get people passes when they're angry and they're committing violent actions against their spouse.
Alrighty, we'll pause here. We want to hear from the viewers at home. Do you believe animal cruelty should be treated as a public safety issue instead of a property issue? Just head to our website to weigh in. Now, we'll be right back. There's much more to discuss on how to stop the abuse. You're watching Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse. We'll be right back. Good evening. I'm Briana Supardi. If you're just joining us, this is Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse, a CBS 6 roundtable on New York's animal cruelty laws. What's working, what's not. In recent months, we've seen case after case across the capital region. 21 dogs found dead at a boarding facility in Argyle, dozens neglected in a Schenectady home, a pit bull starved and set on fire in Albany, each one sparking outrage and raising the same question. Are New York's laws strong enough to protect animals, or are abusers slipping through the cracks? Recently, lawmakers came together to announce the New York State Safe Pet Boarding Act, meant to ensure oversight and licensing of boarding facilities.
Nobody should be fearful of having to give their dog to a boarding facility in New York State and not know there are uniform guidelines, regulations, and safety features across the state of New York.
And I want to start this conversation first with the investigators here. How often do you guys see or respond to deaths being reported at boarding facilities?
In Saratoga County, not often. The Time for Pause case, I believe, was our first in a while, if ever that was reported to us.
Similar for us, obviously we had the Gilderland case where the dog was starved in the boarding facility. We have gotten other reports over the years of alleged neglect at boarding facilities. Sometimes it's unhappy customers, but there have been some situations that have been handled where animals have either been returned home and they've been dirty, or lost significant amounts of weight, or had other medical issues coming out of boarding facilities.
I know the most recent case you responded to was the case in Guilderland, Meadowdale Acres. Can you talk about that case?
So with that, the Guilderland Police Department was originally contacted and told that a person's dog had passed away at that boarding facility. The owner of the dog was the reporting party, and they responded out and then asked us to come and provide some technical assistance. It's always shocking in these types of situations when you see one animal that is neglected or abused and other animals from that same property that aren't. So it was a pretty shocking situation.
And this dog that died, it was literally starved to death.
That's what we believe at this time, yes.
And Mr. Jordan, I know you have just dealt with many families whose dogs have died in the Argyle boarding facility, a lot of them unhappy. Tell me about prosecuting those cases, or what you found after speaking with those families.
Yeah, I think with the boarding law, it would probably be more so helpful in the fact that it's so unusual to have animals pass so quickly, and that would be such an unusual situation. I think what you would more often find is what we see elsewhere, which is animals that the condition of the facility is not great, but that's hidden from the families. They're not able to adequately provide for the animals, and that's hidden from the families. They have a good-looking front, but not the support they need. And I think that's where we would see the greatest benefit from this, is it would give our animal control officers and law enforcement something really to go and help the business owners do it right, to avoid these from happening in the future. I think what's really hard here for our victims, the pet owners, is the reality that the way the law is written, that there's no one that would ever be satisfied that it is just a misdemeanor. And I think that is something that I would never expect them to accept, and I think that's also what will make this journey for them so difficult, is to realize that, as you discussed earlier, it's viewed more as a property, and in New York, the equivalent of a cell phone, not a family member. And I think that will be difficult for any victims in any situation.
I think there's a big gap
with shelters and breeders in terms of oversight from the state level. Why shouldn't we have uniformity of boarders? When somebody sends their dog or a cat or pet over there, there should be some uniformity that they feel that they're going to be treated and that they're going to be overseen. Right now, it's kind of like the Wild West in New York State. New York City has a bordering set of laws, but it's up to the municipalities now, and some of them are doing a good job. Some of them are not doing much in terms of inspection. With our bill, there will be inspection, there will be monitoring, and as I said, it'll go through a whole series of areas to provide safety. So I don't see why we do it for shelters, or why we do it for breeders, but when they're taking your dog and you go away for a vacation for a month, let's say, for 4 weeks, they should be getting some exercise. They should have their own space. They shouldn't be sleeping in a space where they go to the bathroom and a whole bunch of temperature corrections and ventilation, the things that cause the loss of this life, because it's to mitigate the loss of life. I don't want to see it happen. Oh, then we got to do something about it. We have to have a penalty for them. I'd rather not have penalties. I'd rather make sure they know the uniformity of what they have to do. They live up to it. When they're investigated and they're inspected, they're not doing it, they could lose their license. There'll be a $1,000 fine for each violation. And as I said, most of the boarding facility I spoke to said we're doing most of the things you're talking about, but it'll get the bad actors out of the business, and I think that's a good thing.
I also think remote temperature monitoring is very important. Should be part of the standard. Is that if the temperature goes above a certain temperature, the owners of the boarding facility get an alert by cell phone that says, hey, the temperature is going above, because that would remedy a lot of these situations. And I think with the technology we have today, it's very doable and very cheap.
What are your thoughts? In addition to strengthening boarding facilities, the regulations surrounding boarding facilities, what other legislation do you think would help hold these abusers accountable?
We touched on it briefly earlier, just about the gap between the misdemeanor and felony for agricultural markets. So the animal abuse laws used to be in the penal law in the early 1900s. They switched that up about 1960 to where they're under agriculture and markets, which is really just a farming industry regulation, which is great, but the gap between misdemeanor and felony, the public gets upset with law enforcement because they feel like we should be charging a felony level for an animal that died. But as we touched on, if we can't prove that there was intent and we can't, prove that there was with sadistic intent, it just falls back to a misdemeanor. And I think that's very frustrating, both for us and for the public.
And have you guys seen repeat offenders? Do you think the punishment should be harsher? Do you think it's just attracting repeat offenders, the lack of punishment?
100%. There definitely needs to be stronger penalties. We see almost 100% recidivism rate when it comes to animal hoarding. There's been families that we have, groups of people that we have dealt with repeatedly over the years in Albany County, where, an animal will die in their possession, they'll be charged, and then we'll go do a follow-up visit, and there'll be additional charges that come out of them. So we need to have this coordinated effort between all agencies. We need to have, probation communicating with the sheriffs, communicating with the humane societies and SPCAs and local law enforcement and animal control, so that way all our contacts with these repeat offenders are documented. We're sharing this information, and that way we can all approach it at the same time and make sure that there is penalties and that the no animal orders are enforced when they're issued.
And touching back on the ag and markets, with the laws being written there, I've heard from some law enforcement members that, they're not fully trained in responding to these cases because they're mostly familiar with, the penal code. Is that something that you guys are familiar with?
Yes, and I think we could all agree that more education overall is a good thing. So providing more education within law enforcement, but also outside of that. So in Saratoga County specifically, we've been meeting with people from social services, members of child protective services, trying to train them on what to look for, hopefully so that something could be done before there is any criminal activity. Maybe it's somebody that's fallen on hard times, which Deputy Vogler and myself can attest to. There have been times where we get a tip and we follow up on it, and unfortunately maybe someone had recently passed that was the breadwinner for the family, or both parties have been having a hard time trying to find a job. Some pets need specific diets or medications, and neighbors are noticing like the dog has lost a little weight, or maybe its fur is patchy. And I do want to say that we still have discretion. So there are times where if a family has fallen on hard times and we get a tip and we look into it, we can assist them in surrendering the animal to the shelter, getting it the care that it needs, and a home that can provide for that animal as well. So I did just want to point that out too.
I think that's huge, kind of having this holistic approach. One of the things we do is we have a pet food pantry, and if we get to a scene and we realize that it's not a lack of care, it's a lack of means, nobody should have to make the choice of, do I feed my child or do I feed my dog? Because obviously they need to take care of the humans, but not taking care of an animal is such a painful choice to have to make. So if we can provide resources to people to help them out of these bad situations, be it low-cost veterinary care, surgical services, or just a simple bag of dog food to help them, get through to the next paycheck, that could prevent a situation from turning criminal, and keep that animal in a home and keep a family together.
In your experience, do you find that it's lack of resources that's the main cause of someone possibly neglecting their animals and then leading to cruelty?
I wouldn't say the main cause, but we do see it quite often. We have a whole community outreach department that specializes in doing that. We've started doing pop-up food pantries at the Arbor Hill Public Library and in the city of Troy to provide these resources.
And Senator Tedisco, I know you have a number of bills strengthening animal cruelty laws here in New York State. One of them is making these offenses bailable. Right now they're all appearance tickets. The other one is lengthier prison sentences. Can you touch on those?
Yeah, I think just sometimes that the crimes are so heinous, you shouldn't let people walk. There's 49 other states which allow judges to decide if the person before them is a danger to themselves or others. Bail them, okay, cash bail. This is one state that's not doing this right now. And I think law enforcement can tell you in many instances they give them a ticket, not all the time, not every time, but they walk. Now our law enforcement people get frustrated. I got to go find that guy again, and I got to go find this other guy again. They got another ticket. They're not going to go before the justice. And they know probably there's other crimes taking place that might be more serious. But when you allow several misdemeanors or several violations to go by way, that's when it gets up to the big crime. That's when somebody loses their life, or there's a violent crime. So if you do any poll in New York State, and you've probably seen the polls, the two things that they're concerned about. We're #1 in out-migration of all 50 states. In the last census, that points at one of 7 states that lost another representative because of loss of populations. It's affordability and it's public safety, the top 2 issues. We don't quarantine elderly people to go out into the street because of COVID. They're quarantining because they're afraid to walk down the streets sometime. And that's of a real concern to my constituents and other constituents. And that's a part of this too, especially in domestic violence. You cannot be releasing these individuals without getting them cooled down a little bit to understand you can't go back. We need orders of protection sometimes. So it's nice to say that crime will disappear. You don't have to fund law enforcement, which is ridiculous, okay? Because I'd love to see a social worker come to my house when somebody's got a gun to my head and really convince them not to shoot me in the head. That's not going to happen, okay? Send a policeman with a uniform, a badge, and a gun, and guess what? They wear a Kevlar vest because they know they're walking out the door, and so does their family know that they have to get between a predator and protecting somebody's life. We got to respect these people, okay? They're out there putting their lives on the line, and we can't let criminals walk the streets because we don't want to cash bail them and roll them over until their court case comes up.
Has there been any pushback against some of the legislation you're introducing?
Not that I really heard of, but many instances, they just get locked up in committee. Look, the mindset seems to be, we don't need any penalties. You know, let them loose, okay? Let them go, be nice to them. Well, be nice to the victims, okay? If you're gonna err on the side of protecting the victims, not people who perpetrate crimes. And that's of a real concern right now with many of my constituents.
All right. Well, we're opening up the conversation to the public. Do you think New York should create a statewide animal abuse registry to track offenders? You can participate in our poll on CBS6Albany.com. Now, we'll continue the conversation. You're watching Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse. We want to end tonight with solutions. One final question for each of our panelists. If you could change one thing tomorrow about how New York handles animal cruelty, what would it be? We're going to go around the table to hear from each of our panelists. Deputy Hal, we'll start with you.
I would say education across the board, educating the public, more of our public servants, law enforcement, magistrates, just more education across the board.
I would say just the restructuring of the misdemeanor and felony so that we can give justice to animals who lose their lives who are still only considered a misdemeanor. I would like to see that change.
Across the board, we need more resources. We need spaces to bring animals to. We need veterinarians that have the training to do forensic examinations. We need ideally funding from the state or from some government entity across the board, because when we seize animals, be it from the Humane Society or the Sheriff's Department, state police, that's living evidence. So that's evidence that has to be fed, watered, walked, receive medical attention and care for the duration of that court case. For smaller agencies, that can be very detrimental to their budget and can make it difficult for them to say, like, yeah, we're going to jump in and we're going to handle these animal cases.
Mr. Jordan?
I think what I would do to follow up on what was just said is I would look to have our animal cruelty charges mirror more along the line of assault and endangering the welfare. Right now, the same conduct that can be horrific or resource-driven is a misdemeanor. And I think we really should look at improving and strengthening those areas where different types of conduct merits a more significant charge and doesn't require to get to the felony level. It looks as much at the injury that's caused and less so at demanding such a high standard for the only type of felony charge. So I think if they could create that type of gradation of crimes, I think would greatly help not only the public have confidence in what we do in trying to enforce these, but would hold the offenders accountable.
Senator?
Yeah, well, I've spoken about, and we've talked about several bills I have, and some of my colleagues are supporting many of them. We got that boarding bill we just put out today. But I want to talk to the constituents who are watching right now and tell them this. Don't let your government fool you, or any government official fool you. The most important part of our representative democracy aren't elected officials, local, state, or federal. The most important part of our representative democracy are the taxpayers, the voters. I didn't get Buster's Law, the first animal cruelty bill, one of them, across the nation by myself or my colleagues. I got it because people said we want that agenda change for animals. If you own an animal or you don't own an animal, you don't have compassion for them, I would say to them, anyway, it's not going to end with them. FBI says it may lead to you or your loved one being harmed. It's a bridge crime. So I would say report it when you see it, stand up and speak out, come to the Capitol and speak to your legislators, send us letters, send my colleagues, and tell them you think they're a part of the family. They're not property. If you protect them, you protect me and my family. That message has to go out there stronger than it ever has before.
All right, Mr. Rinke?
I think a statewide registry is the most important thing that we need, is because right now we have a patchwork of county registries. I think we need a statewide registry of animal abusers that are searchable by the web, so that people that are selling animals can search it, make sure someone's not on the registry. Law enforcement knows clearly who they're dealing with if they have past offenses. I think that's the #1 thing that would benefit law enforcement and also the public, is a statewide searchable registry.
Now, are there any discussions being had at the Capitol, Senator, shifting animal cruelty laws out of ag and markets into the penal code so that, animal cruelty cases, they're elevated to the same category as violent felonies with sentencing to match?
Yeah, we have a bill actually to do that. And there are many sponsors. I'm a sponsor of that bill. Ag and markets deals with cows and pigs and horses and things of that nature. But they are not cows, pigs, and horses. Not that we shouldn't protect them, not that we should treat them with brutality, but they're a part of the family, more or less, our companion pets. And we have to have respect for them. They give us unconditional love, great service animals. And again, those who hurt those animals have no compassion in many instances for our loved ones, human beings. It's got to be seriously looked at and treated.
Right. And what do you guys consider the bigger problem, the laws themselves or how they are enforced?
I think we do a great job with doing what we can with the laws. That is our job, right, is we enforce the laws. So the investigations may be lengthy, they may be more difficult than other ones. But I think across the board, most of the agencies in this area are really good about putting animals at the front line as well and doing a good job with those investigations. So I think go ahead.
Do you think if we shifted animal cruelty laws to the penal code out of ag and markets, in what ways would that impact how you guys investigate?
I don't think it would really change the investigation per se, just with prosecution and sentencing. It would still be the same tactics we use, just like any other call.
Do you think there would be more education, priorities placed within law enforcement if it was placed in penal code?
I think there would have to be, yeah.
So right now, I believe DCGS requires 2 hours of training for animal cruelty in the academy. So if it were to change to penal law, maybe possibly they would increase that. I'm not sure.
All righty. Well, I thank you guys all for being here with us tonight. It was an insightful conversation and a productive one as well. Tonight, we heard from investigators, prosecutors, and lawmakers, and one thing is clear. Animal cruelty isn't just about pets. It's about justice, accountability, and community values. And whether reform comes through harsher penalties, a statewide registry, or the law recognizing pets as lives worth protecting instead of just property, the call for accountability is growing louder. We thank all our panelists for joining us tonight. And if you missed any part of our roundtable or want to share it with others, the full discussion is also posted on our YouTube page, CBS 6 Albany. For Accountability Unleashed, Stopping the Abuse, I'm Briana Supardi. We thank you for watching. Good night.